Is the sound working now? You were getting some full-on mimes. That's amazing. Okay, so that was some properties issue. I was talking mainly about load shedding in South Africa and how today we will be focusing on exchanges in chess, the concept of exchanging, when it would be good to exchange pieces, when it would be good to keep the pieces on the board that you have many pieces, bishop versus knight, and so on. That's good. I'm glad that it's all working. Vlad, you were promised Raluca. I'm sorry to disappoint. Yes. All right, but we're back. We're actually currently having a power outage in my area. Load shedding is just some national power outages, locational, and I was making sure you guys have your coffee ready. Quite the opposite, that's good. Okay, so this is the first position that we're going to be taking a look at. It is black to move in this position. It is also Borrow, I don't know how to pronounce his surname, versus Luc van Vely in 2016 Dutch League. And here is a prime example of where the exchanging of pieces are just so important to take note of. First, we're going to look at the pawn structure. White has two pawn islands. So we have, let's highlight the pawn islands White has. White has two pawn islands. Pawn islands are separated by open files, and here black has three. And the main problem with black's pawn structure is that black also has an IQP, an isolated queen's pawn, that he may actually have to deal with. And since this IQP is locked on a light square, it would probably make white's light squared bishop the most dangerous culprit. So here, our main aim is to try and get rid of it. But how would we even go about that? How would we even go about that? And I've given you a hint already. So what you need to try and do is come up with a plan with black pieces, of course, involving our concept of today, the fundamentals of exchanging pieces. And where would you even begin? New ringtone, oh my goodness. Okay. So like I said, black to move. I'm glad you guys can hear me now. Hey Dave, good to see you. We're just gonna leave the lighting alone altogether. That's good that you can hear me clearly, I'm happy. In the beginning, I was completely muted. And I was actually testing you guys to see if you have learned the art of lip reading, because that's very important when playing chess. If you don't have the commentators in earshot, obviously you must be able to lip read what they're saying about your game. Why are you playing? And that way, you can always play the best moves. And that is the excuse I'm sticking with, no backsies. Hey, Pipette, no Planty? Planty's here with me, don't worry. My pot plant that I have is actually a certified grandmaster. And my coach. So Planty coaches me so that I can coach you guys. That is actually what's going on here. Has it changed? I guess my name is Bruluka today. No problem. Let's try to make sure. Plenty is the root of all chess knowledge. Ain't that the truth? Yes. Okay, so we're focusing on this beautiful position, and we are going to try and decipher Luke's train of thought. Luke Skywalker. Jokes. Luke van Veli. And this is a top tier game played by 2600s. I actually don't know the rating of the white pieces here, but I know Luke van Veli is quite a high rated player, and the main problem that we have identified in the position, of course, is this pawn over here on d5, which is obviously a positional and potentially material threat here that white has, obviously trying to just simplify the pieces so this pawn becomes weaker, but also for now black has the space and has to obviously come up with a plan. So the idea is to play bishop takes knight. And bishop takes knight is the first move that was played. Of course, it's forced to take back. But now, what is the next move? The next move is so important. And like I said, it has a lot to do with the pawn on d5. So I'm going to let you guys guess the move. Raluca is very proficient in English, so and I would know because I am her. Yes. But for those of you who really don't know me, my name is Jessie February. I'm from the beautiful country of South Africa, where we have roaming lions on the street, and sometimes we even ride 2 of us, 3 of us on a lion's back, playing some magnetic chess, using a very small chess set. Sometimes we ride on giraffes, but that's a little bit frowned upon in today's society, you know. Bishop f5, exactly. Good job, Pipette. Did you get your name after the month you were born in? I was actually born in January, Polko. But it's a very good try. They say your surname reflects your personality, and since my surname is February, it means I have a big heart. There we go. Bishop f5 is the move that is played, or that was played here, and the main point of bishop f5 is, of course, to play bishop e4, eliminating white's strongest bishop, which is obviously targeting the d5 pawn. Of course, it's important to note that black would not just rush into capturing on d5, because that weakens the d5 pawn tremendously here. So what would happen if white took the pawn? What would happen here? Don't tell them about the flying lions, you mean the griffins? We're not supposed to mention the griffins. It's South Africa's trade secret. If everyone knew there were griffins in South Africa, there would be a lot more tourists. Thanks, Kelvin. Well, I guess in the meantime, I will check this stream title, no problem, while you guys give me the answer to this. What happens after bishop takes d5? I think we should be back to our actual name. You can let me know in the chat if that's the case. Yes, knight takes bishop. Bishop c2. Because here after queen takes, yeah, bishop c2 much better than queen takes. I was thinking there was a potential tactic, but I guess not. So bishop c2, king a1, just picking up the exchange over here. So that's quite glorious. Unless I'm missing something, let's see. Nope, that is what the engine suggests as well. It might also mean you're short, as February is the shortest of all months. Yeah, I have a height complex. But we shouldn't talk about that. I think we should move on to greener pastures and positive vibes, if you know what I mean. Okay. Starts crying. So that is the position of the 2016 game versus Baloch and Luc van Vele. That was not supposed to happen. This is the perks of using one screen once again. Thank you. All right. So the next game that I really want to show you is a game that I have taken from my very own database. And now you may think, wow, the coach plays too? And usually that's not the case. If you're a coach, you focus on coaching. But yes, it is true. Coaches play. So this game was played in 2017. Miniature Flex. It was the African Championship. The first game as well was the first time I had ever played a continental. On my way there, someone had long fingers and snatched my phone up and it disappeared into the blissful oblivion. And on top of that, I had no friends. I still have no friends. I'm joking. I had no friends who were participating in the event, so it was difficult to. But okay, you make friends at tournaments, so it's nice. But you know, going there with no phone, it's a little bit lonely out there, especially when the Wi-Fi is even as bad. So it's okay. Then it turns out that when you don't communicate with anyone and you have nothing better to do than prepare, that's the best thing for your chess. And in the first round, I was paired against 2200 Mona Khaled, and this was the game in front of you. And I'm going to explain to you exactly my thought process of the game that was played 3 years ago. Yes, I remember exactly how I felt in every moment of that game. That's the pretty cool thing about chess. If you involve emotions into your games, okay, quick draws you will never really remember, but those long, hard-fought games, you will remember a lot about it. You'll remember even what the arbiter was wearing. That is what my memory does. And then when it comes to things I've done last week, then it's just okay. Moving on. If you have no friends, get a plant. Exactly. That's sweet, thank you. Alrighty, so let's begin the game. Of course, being an e4 player, I played e4. Mona replied with e5, knight f3, knight c6, and I decided to keep things simple. I used a lot of time during this game because, of course, naturally I didn't want to slip up or make mistakes. I felt like before the event I was very underprepared, and even for the first round, we didn't have a lot of time to prepare. The pairings came out probably an hour before we were actually meant to start playing. So bishop c4 and bishop c5. And I already knew, okay, we'll have some kind of Giuoco Piano, Italian. I was thinking about playing c3 and then d4, but I thought, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Just play it safe. Yeah. It's all about story time, because whenever you go over a game that reminds you of a game that you've played, or whether it be that game itself, it's going to bring up a lot of memories and emotions. And all I remember feeling from that event is, I don't want to say lonely because that is sad, but rather very focused. And it woke me up to what I really wanted to achieve, and that was winning the event. And by winning the event, we would be able to receive our Women Grandmaster title. And if you came second or third, you get Women International Master title. So that's pretty cool. So after knight f6, I decided to play d3. And d3 was just to protect the pawn. Usually over here in this position, these days, I'll go for something like d4, which is a little bit more aggressive. But against higher rated players, you must always assume, actually against everyone, you should assume that they know their theory and that they're going to play the best response. And what I didn't like is after this kind of continuation, bishop, bishop d2, and taking, already white is down a pawn and having to take like this, and this bishop f7, king f7, queen b3, d5, and knight e5. Then there's king e6. And after taking, I didn't really like the prospects of c5. I felt like, yes, it's equal, but also, I mean, it's just, in a position like this, I wouldn't feel too comfortable, because the best move here is queen a3. And after that, taking, you would have to play something like knight d3, queen f6. Is knight d3 the move? No, it's knight f3, sorry. Knight f3, queen f6, and queen d3. And yes, it's equal. But the bishop's going to d7, the rooks are coming to the center really quickly, and it's a cause of concern, and I didn't want to get into this. So coming back, so my theory is so important, but actually back then I'm pretty sure I didn't even know this theory, so that's why I played just the normal d3. Let's go back. There we go. Alrighty, so after d3, d6, just normal, developing, opening up the range for the bishop here. Hi, John. Castling, and bishop b6. And bishop e6 is such a normal move here, and I suppose it's kind of anticipating a later d4 and saving a tempo whereby after d4 I would be attacking the center and the bishop on c5. I played a blindfold match yesterday and got into a very similar position. Only when my opponent played d4, because I played e5 against d4, I forgot my bishop was on c5. And I completely didn't do anything about it. I probably played something like knight c6. I don't know what I played. I played something and I lost my bishop on c5. So this is a nice prophylactic move. Prophylaxis is all about preventing your opponent's plans, or at least anticipating it and trying to stop it. Okay. So after bishop e6, I played knight b to d2, which is a normal move here. The plan is to go rook e1, knight f1, and then you kind of have some flexibility between knight e3 and knight g3. So it's all about the maneuvers here in the Giuoco Piano, and also the bishop is meant to end up on c2. I don't know, after a move like knight a5, probably bishop b5, c6, and bishop a4. Then you would prefer the bishop to be on c5 or b5. Okay, let's go back. So knight d2 and bishop g4. Now bishop g4 does seem like an annoying pin. Ooh, let's use an arrow. Does seem like an annoying pin, but usually when you have a knight on d2, there's less to worry about, because you'll play rook e1, then you'll play knight f1 and h3. After h3, I feel like a lot of people would actually capture on f3, but if they go back, you have knight g3, attacking the bishop again, activating the knight on g3, covering up the king, creating a nice cozy nook for the king, and also looking towards f5, defending on e4, and heading towards playing d4. So it just falls into place. I feel like this kind of opening just falls into place. It's very similar to the Rilo pairs, but I feel like the Rilo pairs is a little bit quicker because the bishop goes from b5 to a4, but there's a lot more theory involved, which I wasn't prepared to learn yet. Blindfold, how do you see the position in your head? Do you use memory system? Very impressive. I think just with experience, you can also practice your visualization by playing blindfold games. You don't have to particularly be good at it. I'm terrible at it. But it's going to help you look for tactics during your games. It's going to help you when you go to the bathroom, or you taking some break during an OTB game, maybe grabbing a snack or a drink. You're constantly thinking about the position. You don't have to be at the board. That's why you find a lot of the top players, they'll walk around or stand there like this and like keep their eyes closed, or like look up towards the ceiling trying to recall some theory that they've learned, and they don't necessarily have to be looking at the board. And I'm pretty sure that Hikaru Nakamura is a prime example of this. And when he's calculating something, he looks up and he goes, and the board is either on the ceiling or he's visualizing these things. So it's good practice. It's very good practice. Okay, so rook e1. And queen d7. Now, when someone does not castle, but rather provides or creates this kind of opportunity for themselves to both queenside castle and kingside castle, it's a cause of concern. Because if they are opposite side castling, then you know that it's going to be a huge fight. What do you guys think about opposite side castling? So if I castle on the king side and my opponent intentionally sets up to castle on the opposite side, what is your impression? Imaginary whiteboard in front of us. So here, my main worry is that she was going to long side castle. So when your opponent threatens to do something like this, there's something I like to do. You gotta scare them off of trying to follow through with their plan. Now, you're either bluffing or it's a real threat here. And that's why, okay, I started with h3, but my thought was playing something like a4, and after a4, it would say, okay, you want a long castle? That's fine. I'm going to play b4, b5, a5, or a5 first and then b4, b5. So, aggressive play, exactly, Tolek. Don't know enough to say. I think Nightbot was doing some funny stuff, Calvin. Don't worry about it. Okay, so h3 and bishop goes back to e6. Not what I anticipated. So here I was actually thinking about bishop h5, after which I would play something like knight f1, or even here I think a4. And the reason for a4 is to kind of usher their king towards the king side, to say, if you queenside castle, my pawn is already on a4, so try me. And the only way to then deal with this is after b4 playing a6, because I'm threatening to play a5 to trap the bishop. Then maybe here, it would be a good idea to play this in either case, bishop a7 and b5. And that looks terrifying. You see, it's not much of a problem for me because my king is not on this side, but that king is. So when you have an opposite side castling, you have the right to pawn storm, and pawn storm is literally storming the king with your pawns, and those pawns were not protecting your king. So go ahead, nothing is stopping you. So taking, and this is just so much better for white. It's completely winning for white. The a file is semi-open. The bishop is on b5, creating this pin, and you will use all your pieces, so you will drive all your minor and major pieces towards the queen side to attack the king. The main defenders of the king right now would be the bishop and the knight, and you will try to exchange these pieces with moves like knight c4, bishop e3, and then at some point playing a6. And the whole point of a6 is you want to either queen the pawn or open up the a file, and both of those work pretty well. Okay, let's go back to what actually happened. Oh my goodness. Alrighty. So bishop e6. Now what? Bishop e6 could be met with a bunch of things here. The candidate moves that are going through my mind, obviously taking as number 1, bishop back as number 2, or simply leaving it by playing something else here. Maybe even a4, because after bishop takes c4, there's knight takes c4, and I'm threatening the bishop on b6. So we have to consider all these options. And this is the first point where I'd really stop and say, this is a critical position, meaning the decision you make is obviously going to change not only the pawn structure potentially, or it also kind of changes their dynamic. Because here, there are static pawns in the position. Those static pawns are d3, e4, e5, and d6. What are static pawns? Pawns that are kind of stuck temporarily in its place. So for instance, well, not for instance, but here the pawn on e4 and the pawn on e5 are not going anywhere. And that's going to say a lot about the power of the bishops. If your pawns are on light squares, or at least locked on light squares, that makes your light squared bishop automatically your bad bishop, and your dark squared bishop the good bishop. Now in this position, it may not seem so, because the light squared bishop is seemingly more active than the dark squared bishop. But once the bishop reaches a square like e3, it would complement the pawns, because it would be able to move between these pawns. It would not be contested. But the light squared bishop is. And quite the opposite is true for black, right? The dark squared pawns, they're kind of locked on the dark squares, and the light squared bishop is good. The dark squared bishop is bad. And that is the first thing that helped me realize that maybe capturing the bishop is the best way to go. But my plan usually the plan in the Rayleigh pairs or the Giuoco Piano Italian is to play d4. But if you have the good bishop with a pawn structure that is favorable towards that bishop, you will not want to change that pawn structure. So if you take on e6, d4 is not on the table anymore. Unless, of course, you're kind of disregarding the power of the bishops here and you just want the center, then by all means. But strategically speaking, it would be better to keep the pawn structure like this. And of course, if you're taking on e6, black will want to open up the file with d5 and so on, because they have the dark squared bishop, making their bishop bad because of the dark squares that the pawns are on. I really hope this makes sense. Test open. Using a shrug? Why are you using a snowman? It's lovely weather today, even though it's only spring. Climbing out of winter right now. It's beautiful outside. Should have given you guys an IRL coach chess stream, coaching you from outside. Okay. So that is why in this position I decided to take. And taking, there are obviously two things that black can do here, either taking with the queen or taking with the pawn. I anticipated the queen, mostly because you could play an easy rook d8 and d5, attempting to open up the files, but here just taking with the pawn. And this is what made me decide as well that d4 was just off the table. My next target was to try and gain this bishop somehow by playing something like knight c4 and knight takes bishop. Not immediately. I just wanted to keep the pressure, because if a takes, yes, there are two sets of double pawns, but also there's counterplay with the rook on the open file, and with her strength and her experience over mine, I did not stand a good chance if I was going to give her any kind of play. So here I just once again wanted to just keep things solid, simple and satisfying, the three S's that I preach all the time, and that is knight c4. So knight c4, and knight c4 is also really nice, just keeping it there, because I feel like the knight on c4 is much more powerful than the bishop on b6. And that's another thing you have to keep in mind when evaluating a position, is when you are thinking about trading a piece, the first question you have to ask yourself is, which piece is better placed? Which one is more powerful? The knight is somewhat centralized. It's putting a lot of pressure on e5 and d6. See, if you push the d6 pawn to d5, then the e5 pawn is hanging. The bishop on b6 has range. It's putting pressure on f2, but at the moment, it's really no issue. And with one swift motion, we'll be able to remove that bishop. No questions. Okay, so here with knight c4, there's another nice trick that I have, and that is to play a4. With a4, you're threatening a5, and that is almost squeezing the bishop, because the bishop has to go to then c5, but then you play b4 and you're winning the bishop. So after a4, they are forced to play something like a6 or a5, and now the a pawn can no longer take the bishop, and you can take the bishop, forcing them to move out of the center with their c pawn, and that's perfect. That's what I want. Question, why don't we try to open up the position since the king is in the center? Because with one move, the king will no longer be in a center. So if we play d4 here, she can simply react by playing e takes d4, and after I play c takes d4, then she can castle. And then the rook has an open file to f2. It's kind of dangerous because the bishop is already putting pressure on f2. I would be a little bit worried. Even though there's really nothing to worry about, they would still have two central pawns. I would also have two central pawns, but they can easily equalize with like e5 or d5. And I don't know if I was ready for that. So, in this position, she castled. So there you go. Castling. Once again, I didn't want to play d4. My bishop had range now. Obviously, I wasn't going to play something like bishop e3. My bishop is good. Her bishop is bad. This is what I was thinking. This is what I was under the impression that my bishop was just good because of the pawns that we spoke about. All right, so bishop g5 would have been much better, or just leaving the bishop on c1, because a bishop that has range is already active which shouldn't stop you from developing your pieces, but it's much better to develop your knights first, because just by moving a simple pawn, you've opened the bishop up to 5 squares. But the knight, if you move a pawn, it's not going to give it more range. You're going to have to actually move the knight to give it range. Okay. So here, like I said, a4 was the way to go. So I played a4, now threatening a5 and b4, and if she played something like a6, could just take the bishop, because if I don't take the bishop can go back to a7 next move, and that bishop would just be overpowered. So taking, and now this is a pawn structure I'm happy to deal with, because I could play something like bishop e3, I have free reign, I can even play queen b3 if I really want to. There's double pawns on the b file, there's double pawns on the e file, there are no active open files for black to take advantage of. My pawn on c3 is pretty solidified, it's really no cause of concern. It's awesome. Instead of a4, you want to take the bishop. The one thing I don't like about this is that after a takes knight, the rook has an open file. And for now, there's nothing that black can really do about it, but later on it could really be something I have to worry about, because now I've taken a position where it was unnecessary to give range to the rook, and I said, okay, you want an open file? You got it. And also that pawn is one file closer to the center, and I didn't want to give that away. What's with the emotes test open? Far superior, I agree. Okay, so a4. And then d5. So my opponent played d5 here, and I was very uncertain about d5, mainly because there is a small trick that black has, and I was wondering whether she was bagging on this trick, because it was all based on my very weak square on f2. Yes, there is a free pawn on e5. But let's take a look at this position. What is the best continuation here for white? Is it to take on d5 first? Is it to take on e5? What would you play? Marshall type positions, like the Marshall Gambit? I'm not very clued up in relo pairs, but I'm assuming you're referring to the Marshall Gambit, right? Take on b6, then take on e5. Because the thing is, if you take on b6, then the only thing attacking on e5 is your knight. Then you would have to kind of play knight takes b6, but then after a takes b6, taking on d5, queen takes d5. Yes, they have terrible pawns on the e-file, but you're not winning a pawn immediately. But there's a way to win a pawn. e5 first, keeping the tempo on the queen, but then, okay, I like that. But then isn't there like taking on e5, and then they can take on f2 immediately? Because if you take with the f knight, then they take on f2, and if you capture back, then they have knight takes e4 or something else. 1 second, I have to switch the alarm off because of load shedding. There are two martial gambits and you play both. But martial gambit is giving a pawn. I remember there was a simultaneous event played in South Africa, and Hikaru Nakamura was playing in this simultaneous, and he played against something like 100 people at once. And he had them all the players kind of ranged, ordered by rating, and I was sitting next to someone who was maybe a couple rating points below me. And he played the martial gambit, and I looked at the position, and after a couple moves, I mean, he was a pawn down, and I was like, how can you lose a pawn so soon? This guy is moving around so slowly, you have so much time to think. And I was like, is this theory? Can't be theory. And I was frowning at the martial gambit and not focusing on my own game at all. I played the French against Hikaru. That went relatively well for me. Pawn up, offered a draw. He laughed. And I regret it for the rest of my life. Okay. So he played martial gambit, and at the end of the day, he won the game. So he won a game against Hikaru, and he has that to hold above his head for the rest of his life. So that's pretty nice. It was a good game. Hey, Glamdring. Exactly. And c4 is hanging, and you don't want to give black this chance, because herein lies such an important moment. There's so much that can happen in this position, and you don't want to mess it up. So I'm pretty sure I spent more than 20 minutes on this. ED? Yeah, there's ED first, and then after ED, taking the bishop, and then taking on E5 seems simple, right? He laughed. Does it sound like I put a T at the end? Laughed? Laughed? Loved. Yeah, he accepted though, because he was like, ha ha ha, why are you offering me a draw? You're completely winning. And then he just takes the draw, and I'm like, feels Pepe, man. I know there's some compensation for the pawn. So you get like activity and maybe some attack. That's why it's called martial gambit. And okay, moving forward. Okay, so yes, I took on d5 first. And then after he takes d5, chop the bishop, because the bishop is the main concern here. The bishop was putting pressure on f2, and I think that's the only thing she had. Well, the only attacking chances. So I removed that first, and then I went for the free pawn. So this intermezzo is just so important, because after taking, had I played something like this, it would have been a catastrophe, because knight takes, I don't know if bishop f2 is good here. I feel like bishop f2 is possible. No? Okay. Do you not take then? What's the move? I mean, white is much better, of course. Taking on e5. Take. Do you not take on f2? So there rarely isn't anything. What? Queen d6, the best move. Coming back. Okay, so I just wanted to eliminate that piece over there. Then I took, take, and take. And then d4. Again, wise to take, wise to play c4. There are a bunch of things you can do here. So let's look at all the options. There's taking, there's pushing the pawn, or there's ignoring it altogether and playing something like queen e2, or bishop out, What to play here? Candidate moves. So steps to making a move. Candidate moves. Process of elimination. Blunder check. Make the move. There's no space for doubting yourself. Alrighty. That's true. He does have a knight though, so I guess it could be scary after playing c4. Although, if you allow him to take, and you take back with the b pawn, doesn't that weaken the a pawn? And the d pawn? And if you push the pawn, your bishop is still in a dark square, so it doesn't weaken your bishop at all. It also locks the pawn on a dark square, so potentially your bishop could creep behind the pawn and take it. So there's a lot to consider. Yeah, a4 is weak. Believe it or not, it's better to just leave the pawn there altogether. Allowing black to capture is the way to go. But yeah, I ran scared and I played c4. And then after c4, queen d6 attacking the rook. Defending with queen e1. Queen e1 over queen e2. Such a debacle. So here I decided on queen e1 because I wanted to cover the the b4 square. If queen e2, queen b4, and it's difficult for me to not only develop my bishop but also protect on a4. So queen e1 just seemed like such a fantastic move at the time. You play like me. Actually, 27 me played a lot better than 2020 me, so yeah. Alright. Then there is knight d7. What to play here? Decided to play rook e6, attacking the queen. Queen c5. In my head, I'm pretty sure I was already in time trouble. I was like, I have to trap the queen. This was my mentality for some reason. So I played b4, which is horrible. Pushing a pawn. The one thing about pushing pawns is that you should only do so if you absolutely have to, or you're creating a passed pawn, or you're using it to pawn storm. Because with every pawn push, you're creating a weakness. You're leaving some squares behind. And here, I've definitely created some problems for myself. b4. Pawns cannot move backwards. Once they're there, they're there. Queen to f5. I liked the control over the e-file. I believe the knight was better on f6. So to put it on d7 just to attack the rook previously. Yeah, bishop d2 is quite nice here. But what happens after bishop d2, queen takes d3? d3 is the hanging pawn. d3 is the hanging pawn. Trapping attempt. Yeah, the attempt was weak. You couldn't even see there was an attempt. Thanks, Glamdrang. That's why we have a time emote. g4? No way. I mean, he goes to like f3 or something. Imagine pushing all the pawns. That would be insane. Oh, instead of b4 playing bishop d2, I was actually considering b3, bishop a3. Because in this position, we have b3, bishop a3 attacking the queen and the rook, then probably that was better. But bishop d2, I also like bishop d2. Bishop d2 is probably better, yeah. Queen e2. Bishop d2 is not even in the top 3. So there's queen e2, g4. Oh, I'm saying that. Oh, g4 prepares b4. Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. Anyway, we played b4, queen f5, d2, and rook f6. Then we have rook e7, rook f7, taking, and queen takes. Queen g4. c5. See, here is a bit of a problem because I think the best move is pushing, but then there's a knight versus bishop, and I was unsure whether having a closed pawn structure on the queen side was the best thing for us. That's why I took, but probably not good to take. Anyway, we're going to look at the end of this game. Of course, when you are, and this is so important when exchanging pieces, you have to consider this, is that when you are up in material, exchange pieces and not pawns. Pawns are not pieces. Pawns are pawns, and there are 8 of them. So when you're up in material, exchange pieces and not pawns, because you could be a whole bishop up, and if you're exchanging all your pawns and you only have a bishop at the end, I'm sorry for you, but that's a draw. When you are down in material, you're going to do the exact opposite. You're going to try and exchange your pawns and not your pieces, because you want to be the one, well, you don't want to be on the receiving end of being a piece down, but you do want to be able to draw being a piece down. So here I was just simply trying to exchange pieces. g4 prepares for inside. Sure. So queen to h5, bishop d2 finally, and queen e2. And here is where the beauty begins. Jokes. The whole game is beautiful. Joking again. I got incredibly lucky. So we have rook e1 threatening the queen. Queen has to then take on d3 or go back to h5. So this is sacrificing the pawn on d3, but also just saying to the queen, I'm distracting you. I've created that kind of decoy in d3. You can take it, but I have rook e7, attacking the knight, and also attacking on g7, attacking on f7. This is amazing. And the only move they have here, or she has here, is knight f6. Followed by queen g5, with the only response being queen g6, chopping on c5, gaining the pawn back, d3, and just downhill from here, of course, with very little time and an attempt at precision, this is where it all ended. Because of course the only move is this, and then just followed by rook here, and you're exchanging and queening. And Bob's your uncle. Yeah. Alright, so that was the game, and I think we have time for one more. But I think I'm going to give you the... This is actually a game I lost, but it was amazing. I loved the game. I want to give you guys some tactics first. Alright. So this is the first tactic that I'm going to give you, that I'm going to leave with you. Let me just fix my earphones. Have they been like this the entire time? My goodness. Okay. Crushed that. I got lucky. Okay. So here it is white to move. Very difficult for white to decide what to do because mate is coming. And I think black is just completely winning. So the trick here is to be content with the fact that white might not win, but rather white might draw. And that is exactly what white wants to do here. Try for a draw. Why to play and lose? No. No. Why to play and draw? I mean, this puzzle is crazy, yeah? Oh my gosh, how are you crushing these tactics so easily? Test open. A whole 2400 in the chat. Let's go. Very nice. Good job. So indeed, it is the answer, right? So rook f8, king a7, rook a8, king a8, and then queen f8. And the whole point of this... How is this losing? Ah, okay, sorry, I made a mistake. You just play queen c5 immediately, this is why. Because I was considering something else, right, sorry. My brain did a thing. Okay, so queen c5 immediately, rook a8 is just not necessary. I have a plot twist. Stalemate, yes. After taking... There is rook a8. On bullet game, they don't see queen is hanging and they play b6. Oof. You see now if they play this, then you just continue with taking and you check the king until there's no more check. Right, so if the king goes here, oh, there's no king there, you have to take the rook. You have to take the rook. Because even after rook takes, I mean, it's a complete draw. The king cannot move anywhere. So that's quite nice. Yeah, very nice. Then you win. You play too much bullets, I think. Okay, and this is one of my favorites, one I've done plenty times. White to move. Let's go. Just open, you've tried already. I know you know the answer. Give other people a chance. Give other people a chance. Planty. Plen. Yeah, sure. We're looking for the best continuation for white. Hi, Theodore. Theodore. Where are you from, Theodore? Toss a coin. What? Knight c5. Yes, and after... Okay, so knight c5, queen e7. What happens? Brazil. Awesome. ¿Cómo estás? I can speak the Portuguese. Porch of geese. So we have knight c5, queen e7. Yeah, knight c5, queen e7. Then, drum roll. Yes, good job. Good job, good job, Glamdring. So we have knight c5, queen e7, bishop takes d5, rook takes. And rook takes bishop. Let's go. That's Spanish. ¿Cómo estás? Is it como? Como. Isn't that Portuguese though? I don't know Portuguese. Yeah. What country is bigger than Brazil or Africa? So Africa is actually the biggest country. Or Russia. Africa itself as a country, the whole Africa, it's a great country. You need a visit. You want to ask about a specific move? Go ahead, Dave. Don't forget, when you come visit South Africa, all the lions are friendly. Do ride one. Africa is a country. What are you talking about? It's not a continent. It's a beautiful country. Because it's all about the rains in Africa and the heart of Africa. Could you please reverse it to the starting position? Yep. Go ahead. We'll come back to the other game. It's very instructive, so I'll show you next time. Maybe on Monday. Continent, better said. It's a joke. Don't worry, guys. I do know that Africa is a continent and not a country. I'm just messing with you. You'll realize that, okay, I'm here every single Monday at 8 p.m. CEST. I am joking 80% of the time. The other 20% I'm full on serious about chess. Maybe the percentages could change a little. Hey, Alpharus. Hi, hi, hi. Lions only eat locals, not tourists. Exactly. The lions in South Africa are actually vegetarian, so. To the left of the queen, over here, this is check, but the pawn would just take, unfortunately. Actually, I think the knight would be better suited to take here. The knight would take. Yeah, just because a piece is next to the one you want to attack does not mean it's attacking. You want it to be seen like this, so going from the square to the square to the square. Or the square to the square to the square. This is how you're going to look at it. Is South Africa a continent just like South America? Exactly. Because South America is the country, actually South America is a country south of America. I am messing with you, don't worry. Spain and countries, what? I'm from South Africa, Draymond. Of course I have Instagram. You can look me up. Jessie February on Instagram. Okay, but enough of that. Thank you so much, guys. This is amazing. But to everyone who is here, I really appreciate the participation. I appreciate the support. And also, big good luck to the participants of the World Online Schools Chess Tournament. If you want to read more about me and my fellow coaches on CoChess, you can go to cochess.com and check us out. Yeah, you can just scroll through there, just checking us out and maybe sharing us on the socials will be amazing. It's going to help us out. Thank you very much, and I'll see you on Monday. Bye, guys.